Welcome to Que Pasa, HSIs, a podcast dedicated to everything Hispanic serving institutions. I'm your host, Dr. Gina Ann Garcia, bringing you the news on what's happening in HSIs. Join us as we explore the history and evolution of HSIs, culturally relevant and liberatory practices, current and emerging research with HSIs, and the policies that shape servingness.
Saludos, HSI familia, and welcome back to Que Pasa HSIs. Today's guest is Dr. Abel Antonio Chavez, who serves as the 10th president of Our Lady of the Lake University, or OLU. A first-generation, first-in-family college graduate, son of immigrants, and bilingual administrator and academic, Dr. Chavez is committed to enhancing quality, access, and affordability for all students while serving the needs of families, economies, and communities. In his first year at OLU, he created the Futuro Leaders Scholarship Program, providing first-generation college students a full tuition scholarship while giving them the opportunity to develop their inherent leadership skills. Dr. Chavez personally mentors the students in the program. As a recognition of his commitment and service to communities and education, the Mexican government presented Dr. Chavez with the Otili Award, their highest civil honor. Dr. Chavez is a recognized expert in the field of higher education, especially related to first-generation Hispanic students. He is a regular presenter among higher education organizations and corporate and community groups. He recently was appointed to the governing board of the Hispanic Association of Colleges and Universities, or HACU. Dr. Chavez holds an Associate of Science from Front Range Community College, a BS in Mechanical Engineering from the University of Colorado, Denver, an MBA from the University of Houston, and a PhD in Civil and Environmental Engineering from the University of Colorado, Denver. I'm excited for y'all to hear this episode where we get to talk to another college president from an HSI. President Chavez, thank you for joining us on Que Pasa HSIs, where we talk about all things HSIs. But first, we're going to talk about you. So please just go ahead and start by telling us about your servingness journey.
Gina, thank you so much for the invitation. What an honor to be here with you. Thank you, thank you, thank you. So I was born and raised in Denver, in Colorado. Mom and dad are from Ciudad Juarez, Chihuahua, Mexico. They arrived in Denver, in the mid-70s, thereabouts. And they arrived in the zip code 80216 zip code. As a kid, that was the Swansea neighborhood. Now, my British friends later on in my adulthood used to say, no, Abel, it's Swansea. I said, no, man, it's Swansea. So that was my neighborhood, 80216, the Swansea neighborhood. I-70 and Vasquez Boulevard was what was my neighborhood. Purina Dog Chow was right there, about a half a block away from my childhood home. The highway was right there. And so as a kid, I knew that I had a lot of love for mom and dad. I knew that I had everything that I needed and very little of what I wanted growing up. But it was all of the challenges that I saw around me, really that started with environmental degradation around me in my neighborhood, from a smelter that was in place in the 40s and the 50s. And so understanding that I needed to provide educational opportunities to my community, formal and informal, just educational opportunities, is what got me on this path of education, and more specifically, higher education. But look, the thing is that I never attended an HSI. I went to the community college, which I think today might be an HSI, wasn't back then. And then I went to, that was Front Range Community College, and then I attended University Colorado, Denver, where I earned my engineering degree in mechanical engineering. While I was working, my first real job, I did my MBA at the University of Houston, and then I went back to Colorado and I did my doctorate back at the University Colorado, Denver. And then in higher education as a professional, I worked for the Potsdam, or at the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research in Germany for a few years. And then I went to a PWI, Western Colorado University, a predominantly white institution in Gunnison, Colorado, also a predominantly white community, not beyond just the institution. And then I've been the president of Olu, Our Lady of the Lake University, which is the mother HSI. For the previous 2 years, I am entering my third year of in this incredible role as the president of this incredible institution of higher learning.
Excellent, thank you. I'm pretty sure Fort Range is an HSI now. There are a good number of HSIs in Colorado, as you know, and a growing just body of HSI practitioners who are really trying to be intentional. So yeah, that's a good place to hail from. It's good work. But also good work in Texas, where you are now. So let's talk about it. Our Lady of the Lake, one of the original HSIs, as you mentioned, located in the birthplace of Haku, right? Which we know Haku obviously did a lot of the early advocacy and still continues to advocate, obviously, for HSIs, but really the early advocacy to get the legislation through. And that's San Antonio, right, where you're located. So tell us what you know about the origin story of HSIs and of Haku and how Olu was involved.
Well, Olu, Our Lady of the Lake University, I'm so honestly just so blessed and humbled and honored to call Our Lady of the Lake University home, the west side of San Antonio home, San Antonio home. And in our institutional archives, what's really neat is that we have the founding documents of HACU, the Hispanic Association for Colleges and Universities. We have the founding documents from the initial meetings. And so my team shared this with me a number of months ago, and I was rereading those recently. And beautiful to learn that it was January 22, 1986, where there is a gathering here on our campus in San Antonio, on the west side of our city, around the agenda title is Predominantly Hispanic Institutions of Higher Education Meeting. Again, on our campus. And there were about 11 different individuals or representatives from 11 different institutions at that meeting. And that was January 22, 1986. About a week later, the date is January 30th, 1986. There was the first proposal that was submitted to the Ford Foundation by this initial group of predominantly Hispanic serving institutions that was submitted. And what's interesting is that the seed money that they were requesting to start this, what they were calling back then, Center for Hispanic serving institutions, was $30,000. Get that, $30,000 to start this center, to start addressing some of these issues. And in that proposal, I'll read a couple of the lines, if I may, from that proposal, which is so fun for me to go back and just take that stroll. The opening paragraph says the following: over the last several years, Our Lady of the Lake University, or OLU, has attempted to attract support for a center for Hispanic colleges and universities from a variety of foundations and corporations. OLU has felt that such a center is needed in order to, 1, centralize the collection of data on the needs of Hispanic institutions of higher education as they endeavor to serve a large number of Hispanic students, and 2, to disseminate the collected information to potential funding sources. And so within that proposal, I'm also learning that there were, again, 11 colleges and universities in attendance at the original meeting, with an additional 6 institutions across Texas and Arizona who had expressed what they called a high degree of interest in meeting. And so in the proposal, there's a list of participants. But here we are, right, many years later in 2024, and what I think today we recognize as, yeah, that's the work that needs to get done. But in 1986, however, further in this same proposal, right, there's this problem definition that's stated as the emergence of institutions of higher education with significant Hispanic enrollment is a fairly recent phenomenon. It was a recent phenomenon back then. Hispanic students have enrolled in colleges and universities in increasingly large numbers only since the inception of a variety of federal and state financial assistance programs, most of which did not exist before the late 1960s. And so, again, Gina, look, I reflect on this and say, wow, all of this started here, which now there are about 600 such HSIs across our beautiful nation. And these were the roots in 1986 of all of this movement on this campus. And it's a reminder of the obligation that Dr. Antonio Rigual, who was at the time vice president for institutional advancement, who later became provost of OLU, what he and these other founding members were the catalyst of. It's just a reminder of the obligation of me being in this chair, of the work and the responsibility of how I must serve others like me.
Yes, that's beautiful. Thank you for digging in the archives. Wow, powerful for us to hear some of the like foundational documents, right? And things that were going on, taking us back to 1986, right? Some of our listeners weren't even born in 1986, right? This is a long time ago, but not that long ago, right? Not that long ago at the birthplace, right? The birthplace of HSIs. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that with us. So you wrote an article titled "The Hispanic University of America," referring to OLU. Tell us about the article and about your vision for OLU being the Hispanic University of America.
Gina, I appreciate you reading that article. Thank you so much. And thank you for making reference to that. And, you know, in that article, which the San Antonio Report published, what is it's a snapshot of a much larger essay that I wrote at that time. And after, you know, nearly 1 year of being at OLU, of learning about who our alumni are, or alumni, our alumni are here at this tremendous university, and the roles that we have played, we OLU, in society, in the shaping of Latino, Latina, Hispanic issues in the nation. That was two things. One, my reflection about, again, the roles that we have played, but two, my call to action to the community here at the university to really own the obligation of being the Hispanic University of America. Because in our roots, you know, these major issues that, well, major matters that today are issues like bilingual education, they all have roots right here at OLU. In 1968, we, Our Lady of the Lake University, we hosted the U.S. Commission on Civil Rights hearing on Mexican Americans in the Southwest, gathering folks across Texas, along the Southwest, to have the conversation about what are the issues affecting Mexican Americans, Chicanos, Latinos, Hispanics in the U.S. today. That was here on this campus. When it comes to social work in South Texas, we are also the pioneers of that. As I mentioned earlier, HACU and HSIs, that was a birthplace right here. And so, to me, it is a reminder of the role that we have played in what today is a very blurry higher ed environment, right? Our students have many choices, which is a beautiful thing as to where they want to go to pursue their higher ed dreams. But I also expect myself and all that call this place home to be reminded of what we're about. And what we're about is we're about that institution, that community of learners, of practitioners, who are not shy about tackling the boldest issues to move our communities forward today and tomorrow. And that's my expectation as a Hispanic University of America. I expect us to continue to tackle those major issues of today and tomorrow, all the while making sure that each and every one of our students see themselves reflected in what they do here, in everyone that they come in interaction with and in contact with, and that we who call this place home are doing everything that we can to build that ecosystem so that that student can be and will be successful, and that they too will be agents of change in their communities.
Awesome. Hispanic University of America. I love it. What I appreciate about that, I appreciate the article for a lot of reasons, but I also appreciate that I would think you're a historian if I didn't know you were an engineer, right? That you're drawing on history, right? Like you acknowledge, right? Like big legends and heroes, right? That came from your university and that found, were part of the early part of the university. And that's such an important part, I think, of HSI, right? Like that we have to actually honor our history and to know that there's historical pieces to this, that it isn't just getting that 25% enrollment, that there is deep-seated history. And some places like Olu have deep-seated history. Not all places do, not as deep as y'all have, but like, how do we honor that, right? How do we make sure that we're writing about that, which by you writing about that, that's powerful. And to come from the president, I don't know a lot of presidents that write articles like that. So, so I appreciate that, right? Like, I think one of the things I see that when a president or a provost or chancellors get on board with HSI, the campus moves a lot more. Because you need those upper level administrators, right? We need people like you saying, yes, this is what we're going to do, and this is what we're committed to. So to see you write something like that, that's what it signals for me, right? That like you are committed because you took the time to write that article. So yeah, so I definitely, it is in the show notes for people who want it. It is in the show notes. So feel free to click on it and you can read the article as well. Oh,
and I would love for folks to pay attention to that article and to take time to read it. And I just want to call out a few folks that are in that article. So Isabel or Bel Ortiz, which is one graduate of Our Lady of the Lake University, the godmother of mariachi music. Her mariachi curriculum is across not only San Antonio but throughout the nation. All of that was born here, and so please may God rest her soul. She passed about a year ago in 2023, and what I learned is that Bel Ortiz, through mariachi music, again, she was inculcating mariachi music, and at the time, the discourse was that, hey, we can't be teaching bilingual education in our schools, and certainly we cannot be teaching Spanish in our schools. And her response was, no, I'm not teaching our kids how to speak Spanish. I'm teaching them music. And so the beautiful thing, right, is that she was building a bilingual community through the beauty of music and art. Or Gil Coronado. Gil Coronado, retired Colonel Gil Coronado, also a product of the west side of San Antonio, product of Our Lady of the Lake University. Hispanic Heritage Month is because of Gil Coronado. And so it used to be a week, and Gil tells me, he says, look, Abel, golly, we Latinos, Hispanics have so many contributions in moving our country forward across many, many jobs and disciplines. So he worked with President Ronald Reagan to create Hispanic Heritage Month. And so it's these legends who have roots here, and the list goes on. And I just wanted to recognize that these folks are just legends, and just some of the kindest humans that I have ever met.
Thank you for bringing in the names of folks who you name in that article, right? And that, like, again, that goes to my point of like, we should be doing that. And as you were talking, I'm thinking about like, even those campuses like mine, right? Like UC Berkeley, we are not at HSI yet. We're at 20% Hispanic enrolling, which isn't not significant. That's actually very significant for a large campus like UC Berkeley.
Mhm.
It's a significant number. We're not at the 25%, but it's a significant number. But the deep history of Latine folks on this campus, the advocacy, the students, the grad students, the faculty on this campus, like we have to write about that, right? Like it's not about just getting to that 25%. Like we have to honor those legends. And so as you were talking, I was thinking, oh, we should do that, right? We need to make sure as we're doing our HSI work is we should all be writing articles like the one you wrote, where we honor people who brought this to light, HSI to light, even despite that 25%, right? Even if you never get an HSI grant, right? Like you're still have that at your core.
Mhm.
Which is,
Mhm.
I think, important, right? Because people spend so much focus on the grants, right? Like you got to get grants, and yeah, the grants are good and they help you do things, but it's not everything.
Right.
Doesn't make you an HSI completely. So, and I think that gets into my next question, which is one of the core arguments in the HSI world is that HSIs are Hispanic enrolling, right? And not really Hispanic serving, to which my colleagues and I responded with the Servingness framework, which operationalizes the S in HSI. So we argue for HSIs to commit to servingness in their mission and vision, to commit to HSI in their strategic plan, to hire Latine faculty and administrators, redesign curriculum, et cetera, right? There's lots of pieces to it, but the operationalizing, right, of the S. So how does OLU align with the servingness framework, and what are some of the challenges of enacting some of those practices?
No, and look, I so appreciate the work that you and your colleagues have done to really challenge us, us, OLU, and us as an industry to really serve and always be doing the right thing to serve our students in every way. And so, after reading a number of your work a couple years ago, I then started coupling your work of servingness and your challenges with my engineering background, and I put together this. It's a pipeline schematic, and this pipeline schematic is saying, okay, typically institutions of higher learning, uh, uh, this pipeline being the institution, if you will, focus on recruitment and retention and graduation. All the while, our students, especially our Hispanic, Latino, Latina, bilingual, bicultural students, face a lot of challenges if they're able to enter the system of higher education. And so those challenges show up in the classroom, show up through the material that we institutions provide to them, for them, show up in how we institutions speak to, not necessarily with, but to those families as we attempt to recruit them. Those challenges show up in the services that we provide or don't provide. And so in this short article that I wrote, this pipeline that I created, I'll give you a couple examples, Gina, and as I answer your question. Right. Oftentimes, institutions of higher education, certainly in our communities, perhaps do not acknowledge that our decision makers are our mothers or our abuelas. And so my call to action, my challenge is, are we speaking to moms about, hey, mijita's going off to college? Are we answering her questions, mother's questions, or abuela's questions? I believe that's part of servingness. All right. Or let's say if we are able to provide access to that student, are we presenting the right case studies in that course, whatever that course is, where our students can see themselves reflected through those case studies and the personalities in those case studies, or what we are asking those students to do. So again, that goes back to cultural relevant pedagogy, right? So making sure that we are continuing to update and revise our pedagogy and our materials and our case studies so that they could be culturally relevant. I think that's part of servingness too. Or continuing to answer the questions of financial literacy, or just financial questions for our families about, well, this is the price of attendance. But the price, that published price, is really not the price, because there's scholarships, there's discounting, there's, these other means where you could lower that price. That's also part of servingness. Or, the services that we provide, let's say it's clinical or mental health services. Look, in my family still, I shared earlier, my parents are from Juarez. I grew up bicultural, bilingual, binational. There is still a stigma within my family about seeking out mental health resources. And so what are we doing to lower those barriers or that stigma for our students as they too are having a rough semester, or their stuff going on at home that's just tripping them up along the way? I think that's a form of servingness too. And so at Olu, we're looking at that entire ecosystem, at that entire pipeline, and making sure that we're talking with the right people in the right language, in the right tone, and that in the classroom, we are facilitating our learning, our teaching, our research with our students, that we're providing the right services in the right language at the right time in the right way, right? And so those are a couple examples, along with at Olu. Look, we have the best, and I'm not exaggerating, we have the best breakfast tacos in Texas, South Texas. That's the best. That is a real thing. We have the best breakfast tacos with some really good green and red salsa, right? At also a couple dollars. So you could get a really good breakfast that's so authentic for a couple dollars at lunchtime. I'm not exaggerating either on this one. We have also the best pozole verde and pozole colorado that I enjoy. Whenever I know there's pozole in the cafeteria, oh, I am there. And I'm leaving my salad or whatever it is that I brought from home. I'm leaving that in the fridge. So it's that entire environment and ambiance that we are so keen of making sure that we're attentive to.
I agree. Food is part of servingness. Listen, it's not in the servingness framework. I'm gonna put that out there, that it's not. Not because I don't believe in it, but because the servingness framework was based on a literature review, right? So we did an extensive literature review of over 300 articles that had been written about HSIs, and proposed it. And there's so many missing pieces, and food is one of them. Although I've had good breakfast tacos in San Antonio, so I don't know. I'm sure there's a lot of good spots out there. So there's some people that are listening that are going to challenge you on that. I bet you.
Bring it
But y'all
on.
do have good food. Y'all do have good food. So I'm gonna have to check out the pozole for sure. But that's servingness, the language you bring in, right? The things you mentioned are all not in the servingness framework, and not because we don't think that they are a part of it, but because it wasn't in that lit review, right? That initial lit review. What I do appreciate about your article, and it is in the show notes as well, the Frontiers in Education article, right? That's
That is,
your
yeah. Thank you. Yep.
yeah, it's in the show notes. I do my homework. But what I do appreciate is you do what, like you talked about, you talk about access and matriculation. And that's not in the servingness framework. And the way I reflect on that now is that a lot of the research up to this point on HSIs didn't focus as much on the access and the recruitment, because we were already at the 25%. Right. So by the time people were writing about HSI, you were already at, there wasn't the push. Whereas now there's a push, right? You got campuses like mine, UCLA, UC Berkeley, big state systems that want to be HSIs and that are really focusing on that, right? Really thinking about that. So I appreciate that you bring that in because I think it is a part of serving us. And in the ways you talk about it, the bicultural, bilingual ways that we communicate with families, the decision makers, right? And it's not one, it's like a group, the family, right? The
Right.
whole family is making the decision, right?
Right.
Which is also why students don't go very far from home. We know that
Mhm.
Latina students in particular are staying close to home to go to college, right? And that has to be part of that access and recruitment part. So I do appreciate that because I think there are so many pieces of the servantess framework that don't come in, but they really are. They're servantess, right? Food,
Mhm.
music, all that matters. It all matters to how we serve or how we create environments that are intentional for our Latina population, right? At NHSI,
It matters a
that
lot.
makes them feel absolutely.
Yep.
And I've never been on your campus, but I imagine there is, just because I know the area, San Antonio just has a feeling, right? It feels, the whole city feels like Hispanic serving city,
It is,
right?
yeah.
You feel it. And I talk about feeling a lot, that is an important piece. Yes, change your curriculum. Yes, hire more Latina faculty, right? Like do all those things, but the feeling matters too, right? And the belief is that all those things will help the feeling, right? Make it
Right.
feel like that. So thank you for that. You are, I believe, the fifth president we've had on Que Pasa HSIs. I love talking to presidents because I get to really think about what presidents do. And because I study higher education, I know presidents have a specific role, obviously, in HSI, right? Like you're not the one transforming the curriculum, right? Like that needs to happen, but that's not the role you're playing, right? So
Mhm.
let's talk about you as an HSI president and some of your thoughts and suggestions for people listening on what HSI presidents can do to bring in servingness, considering the things that y'all do, like fundraising, right? Talking to donors, those kind of things matter. And I argue that's serving, right? That has to be a part of the HSI servingness conversation. So talk to us about what you believe HSI presidents, give us some advice on what HSI presidents should do to continue to enhance the servingness.
Well, and I will slightly revise the framing of the question to say must do, because this is just such a strong purpose for me, because in each of our 2,000 students here at Olu, I see myself in them, and so that's why I say what I must do for them. And so on the ground level, I'll start at the ground level. On the ground level, it is uh something as simple but so powerful in how we curate our spaces. So, two examples. As we walk into our main building on campus, there is there's two parlors or multiple parlors. And that space we have now created into a coffee shop type of atmosphere where a student can plug their computer because maybe they've been working their two jobs and they come to campus and they just need some juice in their laptop before they go to class. They could do that there. Or let's say it's that same student who's just finishing up their shift and they just need a quick nap, a quick pick me up before they go to class. They walk in, multiple couches in a really nice setting. They could go take a quick snooze before they head to class. Okay, another ground level thing that presidents must do is we have to create spaces where our students, again, they see themselves. And so just recently, we've launched a beautiful art collection by a major national artist, Lionel Sosa. And Mr. Sosa's collection is really depicts who our students are, who our faculty and staff are, who I am certainly through these portraits which he's painted. And so we see portraits that might be a female of perhaps Afro-Cuban, Afro-Latina descent on one side. We see another portrait of three vaqueros, three male more younger young men. One is wearing a Dare shirt, and they're in pasture land. We have another picture of what appears to be a female, lighter skinned, um, uh, professional, right? But yet she has Latina features, facial features to her. She's dressed like a professional, right? And so it's all of these, and we have an entire hall, an entire corridor where I certainly walk in each and every day, and I'm having these conversations with these various portraits. And at different phases of my life, I see myself in them. And so my wish is that for each and every person who calls this place home, student, faculty, staff, administration, or visitor or guest or donor or friend or whomever, they too see themselves, right, through the art. So we're curating spaces in a very intentional way. All right, so that's on the ground level. Let's say on the mid level, so me working with Cabinet, continuing to remind Cabinet what my values are, what my purpose is, and not backing down from them. And all of that includes that moral obligation of ensuring that each and every student, the majority of which 80% of our students are from Hispanic, Latino, Latina descent, the majority of those are Mexican American, Chicanos, that we are serving them. And again, so challenging my Cabinet to make sure that we are doing everything for those students. And then upper level, higher level is in the stories that I am telling, either through my writing, that I'm bringing those stories back to my community, to my students, to my student body, or that I'm also sharing narratives about what that first generation Mexican American student from the west side of San Antonio, the work that they're doing in the biology laboratory, and how they are the only female in their family to be on the cusp of earning a higher ed credential as a biologist, and sharing that with donors and calling attention to those stories so that we could also drive resources for additional scholarships, scholarship monies, and opportunities for scaling that work. So that's how I think about it on these three levels: ground level, mid-level, and then higher level.
I appreciate that. I like level thinking or layers, right? There's layers,
Yeah.
The different layers to this work. So, okay, makes sense. So I'm gonna keep going down this ideas like some of your commitment as a president, right? And so you are known for enhancing quality access and affordability for Hispanic and first generation students while serving the needs of their families and of the community, right? You've been saying that multiple times. So what are the challenges of balancing a commitment for Hispanic, Latina, first generation students with other students, right? That comes up a lot. Like people are reluctant to commit to HSI because now it seems like we don't care about anybody else. Although you have a large percent, or 80% is a lot. But how do you balance that, right? When people, stakeholder, right? Like constituents of yours are like, well, what about Black students, right? What about white students? What about Native students? How do you balance that?
Yeah, well, and I'll raise my hand and say, yeah, I've heard that same argument myself, and folks have asked me, hold on, Dr. Chavez, and then of course the argument is what you just stated, but a rising tide truly lifts all boats, right? And so providing scholarships for students is providing scholarships to students. Making sure that we have cutting edge, modern pedagogy is serving all students regardless. But look, we humans, we want to be a part of a group. We want to step into the classroom or the C-suite or whatever or whatever other community that we serve or participate in, and see our people in that same group, right? And so our students, just like I'm sure you and I, we have multiple communities, right? We have our multiple villages, if you will. We have our family, we have our work community, we have our faith community, we have our party community. And so look, we get to create those different communities, and we get to invite different folks to those communities, but we do expect that the systems that we're participating in are providing for us everything that we need to be successful, from the technology to the classroom space to the resources, to the books, to the education material, etc. And that is what I'm focused on, is that regardless of background, of course, our focus is our Hispanic culture, our Latina students, there's no doubt. But regardless, though, if there's another student who wants to be a part of this tremendous community, that they're going to have everything that they need to be successful.
Okay. I like it. I think we all need to practice our response to that question, because you're right. I mean, you said you've heard it. I hear it all the time. I actually say it's like there's a couple $1 million questions. That's one of them that I get all the time, of like, how do we commit without feeling like we're exclusionary? Which is just wild, because if you think about HBCUs, they don't have to say anything. Like, they can be unapologetically Black, African American, and we need to do that with HSIs too, right? Like, we can be unapologetically HSI, which doesn't mean we're excluding people, right? Like you said, great curriculum, great pedagogy is going to hit every single person that enters that space, right? If it's culturally relevant, even better, right? Why wouldn't we want our students to learn about other people and other ways of being, other lifestyles, right? Other perspectives. That's going to make us better humans, right? In general. So, so I agree, absolutely. But the idea of belonging matters too, right? I think that's what you were really getting at. That belongingness piece that's major in higher ed right now, right? Everybody wants to know whether or not people belong.
Right.
And my argument is, well, we have to be intentional, right? We have to create spaces of belonging. We can't just expect people to belong to the institution that's 100 years old, right? That maybe none of us feel like we belong. So there's a balance, right? There's a balance of some of that. So thank you for that. So in 30 years of HSIs, we've seen a dramatic increase in the number of HSIs. There's also been a tremendous increase in funding, right? Thanks to advocates like Haku, right? Primarily advocating for all that funding, which we appreciate, although it has not kept pace with the number of institutions, right? So 600 can't possibly get all of that money that's available. It's too many institutions. So what is the HSI president's role in advocating for both HSI legislation and funding?
And before I begin to respond to that, something that you mentioned about HBCUs, myself and my colleague, Dr. Williams, had the tremendous opportunity to visit 3 incredible HBCUs recently: Clark Atlanta, Morehouse, and Spelman. And the work that those 3 institutions are doing, the rituals that they're creating, the customs that they have built over the years, in creating this vibrancy on each of those campuses is incredible. And so now we're bringing that back to Olu and saying, okay, what is our version of that? Because it is time that among this crowded space, 600 to 700 such HSIs, that we start taking the lead, right? And making sure that if it's tacos, we provide tacos. But if it's also us seeing ourselves reflected in the curricula, and that the case studies represent our lived experiences growing up in the 80216s, right? In the Swansea type neighborhoods, where you have soil and groundwater contamination, perhaps a Purina dog chow, which is my neighborhood, right? A highway. And if you're an engineering student, that you wrestle perhaps with those types of case studies, so that then you could go back and say, look, I'm going to now provide some thought leadership to communities like mine or my community, to then start moving these issues forward. So Gina, thank you for letting me rewind a little.
Yes, I love it. I was going to also say that when you brought in HBCUs you visited, that Texas is the home of HBCU slash HSIs, right? So we're also
Yes.
starting to see that intersection that HBCUs are becoming HSIs, which is a whole nother phenomenon. We actually have an episode on that in this season on Que Pasa HSI. So I definitely want people to tune in. So I'll cross promote now, but that's creating a whole nother level of like intricacy, right? Of like, how does this work happen? But I love the engineering example because I think about that all the time. That like, yes, when your home community, you see environmental injustices, you want to fix them. You want to do better. You want to help your community. And engineering is the place I think our engineers could do it, right? Our engineering curriculum could teach our students on how to heal their communities, right? And that to me is HSI, right? Like absolutely. Why wouldn't we want to teach our students who get to go back into their communities and heal it? So yeah, I thank you for all that because it's powerful. So yeah, back to the question. What's your role
Yeah.
in advocating for
Yeah, no.
legislation and funding?
Yeah, so I see my role as the president of this HSI, and really just a proponent, loud advocate of HSIs, of HBCUs, MSIs in general, is again telling those stories of the successes that our students are having because they have their community, because they have their village, if you will, that they could wrestle in a very like manner with what they have seen, and how they have seen the world for years prior to stepping foot on a higher ed campus. And those stories of the success that our students are having are so powerful because that's what I think that's what it's about. And who could say no to folks through the power of education being able to transform their livelihoods based on their values. And so my role is to continue to promote those stories, share those stories about what our students are doing because they have culturally relevant pedagogy, because they see themselves reflected each time they step foot on their campus, because they know that they could talk to their president in Spanish, English, or in Spanglish, which is I'm trilingual. I'm saying that.
Spanglish is my favorite.
Spanglish, yeah, yeah, and it's my easiest too, I think.
I think for most of us.
And so all of those things matter. But today though, I will share that I'm so fortunate to be able to serve on the Haku board. And as a board member of Haku, now I get to also share what on a national level, an organization like Haku through their membership is doing, to continue to let policymakers know that look, we are underfunded, that we have major resource needs, that we have major infrastructure gaps that we need to close to provide our students with the classrooms that they need, with the spaces that they so desire, so that we could continue to be competitive, right, in this massively crowded space.
Mm-hmm. I retweet that for sure. And I asked that question because I want to remind our listeners, right, that like we do have roles and advocate, right? We can't just sit back and say like, I hope everything goes okay. I hope we continue to have support for HSIs. I hope, right? Like, no, we can't hope. We have to actually actively advocate, right? Advocate for what we need. And HSIs need a lot. You bring up the fact that the infrastructure, right? I know you wrote an article about that too, right? I saw a link on that too. But I did see, or maybe you commented on it, a recent article that came out this past year about how the infrastructure, right, of HSIs is actually
Mhm.
really in need, right? That we need a tremendous amount of money in a lot of HSIs to actually get them up just to code, right? Like to get them to where they can adequately serve students. And that's an issue, right? That we know our buildings, our actual infrastructure isn't adequate for our students.
Yeah, and that is a major issue, and that was published by the Government Accountability Office, or the
Mm,
GO, and
mm-hmm.
fantastic report. I encourage everyone to go and read the report, titled "Higher Education: Hispanic Serving Institutions," which report extensive facility and digital infrastructure needs. It is a must read for certain leaders of HSIs, but just overall folks in higher education in general.
Yes, that one's in the show notes too. So I agree. It's a must read. When I read, I was like, why aren't we talking about this?
Right.
And when I read it, I was actually at the Alliance of HSI Educators Conference. And I was like, why aren't we talking about this at this conference? This is actually a major issue. So yeah, I think we need to be like louder, right, and stronger advocates, because it's important. So the other thing with legislation I wanted to go ahead and ask you about was the fact that you are in Texas, and Texas is one of the states that has sort of, really honed in and doubled down on the anti-DEI legislation, which is making it difficult for some HSIs to do HSI work. It seems like everybody's sort of working around, right, as best they can around state legislation. But the reality is HSI is a federal designation, but we still have to follow state legislation, obviously based on whatever state we're in. So how are you navigating the political moment in Texas as a president who strongly advocates for HSIs and for being America's Hispanic university?
Well, look, yes, we are proudly in San Antonio, on the west side of San Antonio in Texas. And I'm always listening to the local, to the state and national level discourse. As a private Catholic institution of higher learning, we receive very minimal resources from our state. And so it gives us the ability, right, to really lean into our Catholic faith, and our sisters, the Congregation of Divine Providence, in their founding virtues is justice, is caring for our communities, especially those most in need, especially those who are most impoverished. And that's what we continue to do today. The West Side, the neighborhood that we get to call home, is largely Mexican American. That's the community that we serve, and that's who we are as a university. And it's our job to make sure that that we are providing access to each and every one of those students who look to us, again, to set their own chart, their own path, to become agents of change, to move their communities, their families forward. And it's also our job, as I said earlier, to make sure that all of those students, the majority are Mexican American, that we are providing an education that gives them a livelihood based on their values. So if they want to be medical doctors, we're going to help them get there. If they want to be engineers, we're going to help them get there. Whatever discipline, however they want to serve society in a productive way, we're going to help them get there.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Oh, it's such a tense moment, right? But you remind me that every institution has to do what operates differently, depending on your private or public or large system, or where you're located. All of that, it comes into play. That absolutely is something I talk about all the time. That every HSI is going to deal with things differently, even if they're in the same region, even if they're in the same state, based on who they are historically. But it sounds like you're really like digging into that, right? Digging your heels in and saying, this is who we are historically. And this is our community. This is the neighborhood we live in, right? Why wouldn't this be the community that we serve? Of course, we're going to serve this community. So I appreciate hearing your perspective as a president, to know that you're committed. I love it. I love to know that there are presidents out there advocating for HSIs and in this fight, right, with a lot of us in the HSI movement, as I call it, that we are all trying to do good work with them for HSIs.
Mm-hmm.
So final question before you get out of the podcast. The name of the podcast is ¿Qué pasa HSIs? So how do you respond to that? ¿Qué pasa HSIs?
So, I think back to my dissertation, the dedication part of my dissertation, which is a quote from Jaime Alfonso Escalante Gutierrez. We all know Jaime Escalante, right? From Garfield High School.
Yes.
So Jaime Escalante said, one of the greatest things you have in life is that no one has the authority to tell you what you want to be. You're the one who will decide what you want to be. respect yourself, and respect the integrity of others as well.
Love it. Thank you so much, Dr. Abel Chavez, for being with us here today on Que Pasa HSIs.
I appreciate you, Gina. Thank you so, so much.
You're welcome.